All right, everyone, first session back after a short break. This is from day one of the meetup game Josh and I had in Chicago with CCG Poker. First interesting hand, I look down at ace, king, queen, 4, single suited in middle position. Folds to me, I make it 15. Over to the button who makes the call. Small blind also makes the call. Over to Josh in the big blind who makes it 75. And, Josh could be doing this with a wide variety of hands. So I go ahead and shove everything in the middle. Everyone folds back to Josh who makes the call. So we're going heads up to a run out. So just a quick reminder, if I have 5 cards in my hand, such as I have here, we're playing Big O, 5-card high-low. If I have 4 cards, it's just regular old PLO. Flop comes out ace 6-2 with 2 hearts. Turn brings a 5. River brings another 2, now giving us a full house. Josh turns over his hand and he shows the ace, king, queen, 3-2 for the lower full house and a better low. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the high-low aspect of this, so Josh would use the ace and the 3 from his hand, which would give him a 6-5-3-2 ace low, and I would use the ace and the 4 from my hand, giving me an inferior 6-5-4-2 ace low. So me and Josh are going to chop it up here. Early after the previous hand, I look down at Jack 3-3-2-2, single suit in the small blind. There's an early position raised to 15, folds to me, and while it's not a great hand, I definitely have a little extra incentive here as we do something what's called the small blind jackpot. So right now there's $15 sitting on the button, and that money is eligible to be won only by the player in the small blind. So for that reason, I make the call, and the big blind also calls. So we're going 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes out Jack 9-2 with 2 spades, so I flop bottom set with the top set blocker. I lead for 35, and only the big blind makes the call, so we're going heads up to a turn. The turn brings a 6, which does bring in a low draw, but shouldn't change the fact that I think I have the best hand here. So I bet 80, which is all that Tony in the big blind has. He goes ahead and puts everything in the middle, so we're going heads up to a river. River brings a pretty bad card and a king of spades, so I turn over my hand, not really sure about it. Tony turns over his. He has ace, king, 8-7, so he turned an open-ended straight draw and a low draw, but bricked everything, and we're going to take it down here. Early after the previous hand, I looked down at king, 7-6, single suit in the big blind. We're now up to an 8-handed table. There are a couple limpers. Over to the cutoff who makes it 15. Button calls, folds to me, I make the call, and there are 2 callers behind, so we're going 5 ways to a flop. Flop comes out pretty good for us in king 2-2 rainbow. I checks over to the original raiser who c-bets for 40. Folds to me, I call, and there are 2 callers behind, so we're going 4 ways to a turn. Turn brings a 6 of spades, now bringing in the backdoor flush draw. I check, and unfortunately action checks through, so still going 4 ways to a river. The river brings a 10 of spades, now bringing in the backdoor flush. I obviously have to get some value here, and I settle on 125. Folds over to Carl, pretty cool guy, local here in the CCG Chicago area. He thinks a bit and makes the call, and the late position player folds. I turn over my hand, and Carl says I'm good, but turns over the 6-2. So it's always easier to know the correct play after the hand is over, but looks like I definitely missed a little bit of value there on the turn, but happy to take this one down. Shortly after the previous hand, about an hour into the session, I look down at ace, jack, 10-7, single suit in middle position. We go $10, 6 ways to a flop of jack 9-8 with 2 hearts. Checks to me, I bet 25, and there are 4 callers, so we're going 5 ways to a turn. The turn brings an ace. One of the early position players now leads for 100, and I kind of thought for a second that he could have just been making a stop and go play with a naked queen 10, but not 100% sure. But honestly, there aren't many river cards I'm worried about, with obviously the nut flush draw, top 2. So for those reasons, I decided to just call to hopefully pull the other players along in as well, and that's exactly what happens, and they both call. So we're still going 4 ways to a river. River brings a 5, so it doesn't really change anything here. Still have the second nuts. Checks to me. I bet 150 for value. Tony to my left thinks a bit and makes the call. Then over to Brandon, who looks like he's in pain. He's actually one of the hosts here with CCG. He eventually decides on a call, and the other player folds. I turn over my hand. Tony mucks, but then Brandon turns over the 10-7-5-4 for the same straight as us. So we're going to chop it up here with Brandon. Here, look down at king 10-9-3, double suited in middle position. Folds to Gary to my right. Really cool guy from the St. Louis area. Also proclaimed himself as one of my first haters on YouTube. He makes it 15. I call, and there are 3 callers behind. So we're going 5 ways to a flop. Flop comes pretty good for us in 10-3-3 rainbow. Checks to me, I bet 40, and only Carl makes the call. So we're going heads up to a turn. The turn brings a 2, so it doesn't really change anything. I continue betting for $80 this time, and Carl quickly makes the call. So we're going heads up to a river. The river brings a queen, so obviously now there are a couple more hands that beat me, but I still should be good here, so I continue betting for $200 this time. And Carl takes about 30 seconds to mull over his decision before throwing in the chips, and I turn it over, and we're good. So taking down another good pot here. I go card dead for a little while. This hand is about 3 hours into the session when I look down at Ace-King 6-5 single suited in middle position. We go 6 ways, $20 each to a flop of Queen 6-2 rainbow. One of the blinds bets 25, folds over to me, and obviously here with just a pair of sixes, no immediate draw. This is a hand I would typically fold, but you know, it's a meetup game and it's 25 bucks, so I decided to also make the call, and there are 2 callers behind, so we're going 4 ways to a turn. The turn brings a pretty good card for us in the 10 of diamonds. The small blind doesn't slow down, this time betting 220 with only a little bit behind. Everyone folds to me, and you know, if I'm gonna call on the flop with just a pair of sixes and backdoors and I get a 10 of diamonds, you know, obviously can't fold now, so I just put enough chips to put him all in, and he quickly makes the call. So we're going heads up to a river. And I should mention that the small blind in this hand is named Lee. Really cool guy who's one of the regulars here with CCG Poker. River brings a jack, so obviously pretty good card for us. I turn it over and Lee quickly mucks, so definitely happy to take down another pot. Just want to take a second to let everyone know Josh and I had an awesome time with CCG Poker. If you're in the Chicago area and you want a fun action-packed game, definitely check them out at their website, ccgpoker.com. You can find information on all of their games, including their regular Friday PLO. There was also a lot of interest from this meetup game with the PLO Big O mix. You know, a couple of guys mentioned Saturday as a day they would potentially run this game. So you can find all that information on the website, and let's get back in the action. About an hour after the previous hand, I look down at Ace-King 6-5-2, double suited in middle position. Gary limps. I min-click it to 10. Folds over to Carl, who then makes it 40. Josh calls, Gary folds, and I make the call. So we're going 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes Queen 5-2, all hearts. I check. Carl c-bets for 80. Josh folds. I then make it 250, and Carl folds as well. So we're going to take this one down. So I let Gary sweat the hand right before the flop came out, and after I check raised to 250 and didn't get Carl to call, he asked me if I considered slow playing, and I told him yes. You know, obviously I had a pretty big hand, you know, nut flush, bottom 2 pair, and a low draw, but he could easily have ace-3, ace-4 there, and I don't really want to just give him a cheap turn card to draw to half the pot. So usually slow playing in Big O or PLO is going to cost you money, just my opinion. So about an hour and a half after the previous hand and about 5 hours into the session, I look down at Ace-7, 2-2-2, double suited in the small blind. There's one limp, folds over to Gary on the button who makes it 20. I call, and there are 2 callers behind, so we're going 4 ways to a flop. So obviously it's not really a great idea to play many hands that have trips in them, but there is $90 sitting on the button, so that's really the main reason why I decided to call here. The flop comes out Queen 6-3 with 2 hearts. I check, and action actually checks through, so still going 4 ways to a turn. The turn brings a king of hearts, bringing in the front door flush. I now lead for 50, folds over to Gary who makes the call, so we're going heads up to a river. River brings a 4, now giving us the nut low to go along with our flush. And at this point, I'm not really sure if a 7 high flush is going to be good for the high section of the hand. So I bet 200, trying to maybe get him off some kind of middling flush. And he tanks for a while. He tells me he doesn't believe me, which is definitely one of the dynamics that the small blind jackpot creates. You know, me having the $90 incentive, no one's going to really give me any respect for a decent hand here. So he tanks for a while, but eventually folds, and he turns over the ace queen 7 4-3. So he had 2 pair and a worse low. So obviously knowing that, I definitely wanted him to call, but we're going to take this one down. So not only do I win the $90 small blind jackpot, myself, Josh, Gary, Brandon, and a couple others are doing prop bets. So if you have a flush or trips in your hand, that's worth $25 from all the other players. A full house in your hand in Big O is worth 50, and quads and a straight flush is worth 100. This is actually something that Josh and I saw some of the players doing when we were down in Austin playing at the lodge. So just figured it was another fun element to add to the meetup game. I should also mention that you don't have to actually play the hand or win at showdown to get paid out by everyone. Most players would essentially just say fold and hold, and you get paid out. Shortly after the previous hand, I looked down at ace-ace 8-3-2, single suited under the gun. I limp, folds over to Carl, who then makes it 20. Josh then makes it 60. Folds to me, I call, and Carl also calls. So we're going 3 ways to a flop. The flop comes out 9-8-2 with 2 diamonds. I check. Carl bets 115. Josh then pushes all in for about 470 total over to me. So obviously here my hand would be quite a bit stronger if I had another diamond to give me the nut flush. But even despite not having that, I think 2-pair with the nut low draw is definitely strong enough to go ahead and call here. So that's what I do, and Carl folds. So me and Josh are going heads up to a run out. The turn brings in the front door flush with a 6 of diamonds. River brings a king, and I turn over my hand. Josh doesn't look too happy about it when he turns over ace, queen, queen, 4-3. So we both have the same nut low, and my 2-pair is going to win the high portion of the hand here. I go card dead for a while. I bleed chips down for a couple hours until I look down at ace, king, queen, 2-2, single suit in the small blind. We go $20 4 ways to a flop of king, 8-3 rainbow. I check. It checks over to the original raiser, Carl, who bets 60. Folds to me, I call, and everyone else folds. So we're going heads up to a turn. Turn brings another king and a king of diamonds. I check. Carl continues betting for 80 this time, and I make the call. So we're going heads up to a river. The river brings in the backdoor flush with an 8 of diamonds. And I thought about potentially betting pretty large here, as I do have the ace of diamonds. But after thinking a bit, I decided on $60 as kind of a blocker type bet. I could potentially get value from an 8. But, you know, I really just don't want him to bomb the river and me have to be faced with a pretty tough decision. Carl thinks a bit and tosses in the chips for a call. I say I have a king, and he turns over his hand. He has ace, queen, jack, 10-2 with 2 diamonds. So pretty unfortunate. He was in pretty bad shape on the flop, but ends up getting there, so he's going to take this one down. Shortly after the previous hand, I look down at ace, ace, jack, 10-2, double suited under the gun in a straddled pot. I make it 30, fold over to the small blind, whose name is Val. I don't think the guy has folded a hand all night. He goes ahead and 3-bets to 105 and folds back to me. So although my opponent doesn't have a fold button and my hand is pretty strong here, I decide to just call, as if you pair either the ace or the 2, you know, this hand is pretty vulnerable. So we end up going heads up to a flop. The flop comes out 6-5-2 rainbow. My opponent doesn't waste too much time before announcing pot. And this is kind of the situation that I was talking about. When you only have 2 low cards in your hand and you get a low only flop, such as we have here, your hand goes from very strong to pretty marginal at best. You know, obviously I just have the pair of aces. I would need another low card to come on the board to even make a low, which really wouldn't be that great. So I show my hand to Josh and tell him that obviously most people here would 4-bet and throw my hand in the muck. And my opponent turns over his hand. He has ace, ace, 7, 3-3. So with that flop, him flopping the nut low, he had me in pretty bad shape, and he's going to take it down. This hand is a little bit over an hour after the previous hand. I look down at ace, ace, queen, 8-5, double suited in the big blind in a double straddled pot. Fold over to Carl, who limps. Then over to Val, who I played in the previous hand. He makes it 95. Folds back to me. I make it 340. Folds back to Val, who has a little bit more than that. He puts it all in the middle, and of course I make the call. So we're going heads up to a run out. The flop comes out jack 10-10 with 2 clubs. Turn brings a pretty good card for us in a king. River brings a 4. So it looks like a pretty safe board. I turn over my hand, then my opponent turns over his. He has queen, queen, 9, 4, 3. So he also turned the straight, but we're going to take this one down. So the game became a lot deeper, and as a result was definitely much crazier towards the end of the night. I unfortunately had most of my hands toward the beginning of the night, but, you know, played for about 11 hours and ended up racking up shortly after this hand.
What's up, guys? Wayne back here with you. So today I was in for 300, out for 1407, so profit of 1107. If you haven't already done so, check out the previous video. I'll link it up here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.